So you want an FTR 1200, huh? You heard it was the American sport bike and the best thing to come from a cruiser company since Harley said we're making a 975cc naked bike and then pulled the old bait and switch and made another cruiser. Well, having spent a good bit of time on the FTR 1200, I feel confident in saying that while the FTR is a super cool bike, it's probably not the salvation of the American motorcycle manufacturers that you're hoping it is. Don't get me wrong, it's fast, it handles better than most cruisers, and it's got modern tech in it. But if you're buying the FTR as a substitute for a Japanese or a European naked bike, you're probably going to be left wanting a little bit. Today, we're going to give the FTR 1200 the so you want a blank bike treatment and hopefully try to make some sense out of this super strange motorcycle. Even after riding it around and comparing it to a few other motorcycles, it's still hard to figure out what exactly it competes with. So we're going to try to find out that answer today as well. We'll also take a look at some potential problems with the bike and anything else you might want to know before dropping 15 grand on this American flat tracker. Now, to understand the FTR, we need to go back in time to the early days of American motorcycle racing, where a bunch of dudes in leather helmets sent Harleys and Indians with barely any suspension, bicycle tires, and weird cafe bars around a dirt oval and had a good time if they managed to walk away at the end of the race. Seriously, the original flat track racers back in the 30s were some serious daredevils. I mean, look at these bikes that they were riding. It was also the genesis of the Harley versus Indian rivalry that's lasted for decades. Even to this day, you've got Indian competing on the FTR 750 and Harley with the XG 750R. The thing about flat track bikes is that they're built completely different than what we normally think of as a race bike. Let's take a second to dissect the anatomy of a flat track racer. First and foremost, on these motorcycles, you'll notice a glaring lack of a front brake. Why? Because real men don't need a front brake. What are you, a wimp? Nah, just kidding. These bikes come sailing into corners at close to triple-digit speeds, and the whole point is to slide the tail end out. To do that, they take advantage of the crazy torque of the V-twin engines to slow down, and then they use the rear brake to start and maintain the slide. Adding any front brake would just result in low siding, and if you're not going to use it, you can save some weight by not having it in the first place. The next thing you'll notice is the front and rear wheels look a little funny. You've got 19-inch rims on rubber. I'd like to say that the tires are fancy, complicated compounds with a bunch of science and engineering and stuff, but they're basically just a tire. They do have unique tread patterns, and they're designed to have some grip on the pavement and dirt, but they're meant to just let go as soon as they hook up so the bikes can slide around. The third thing you've probably noticed is they all look like these custom bikes your buddy swore he was building out of his cruiser and then got bored halfway through and sold it, saying it was a one-of-a-kind dirt tracker. Love it or hate it, the flat track look is an iconic and uniquely American look, seeing as how we're not going to have Indian or Harley gritting up at GP anytime soon. A lot of people would consider it a true American race bike. So with that in mind, let's look at the Indian FTR 1200. Believe it or not, it's the tame version of the FTR 750, which is a funny thing to say considering how raucous the 1200 is. Indian first dropped the FTR 1200 in 2019, and it was an overnight sensation. People who didn't care about getting an American V-twin thought it was a cool looking bike. It's packing a revised version of the Scout motor, bored out to 1203 cc's, putting down 120 horsepower and 85 foot-pounds of Torgarinos. That puts it squarely in contention with bikes like the MT-09, the Duke 890, and the Street Triple in terms of power, but it doesn't stop there. It's got fully adjustable Sachs suspension, rider mode, the track mode, which allows you to disable traction control, and a touchscreen LCD dash. No, it's not a TFT, but honestly, who cares? It's a full-color touchscreen dash. Do you really need 1440p at 144 frames per second? It's a motorcycle, not a gaming PC. Dry, the FTR tips the scales at 489, and wet, you're probably looking at close to 520 pounds, making it a lot portlier than other middleweight or intermediate naked bikes out there. How American. In 2019, you could get the base model FTR for $13,000 and the S, which were given away for 15 grand. By the way, don't forget to click those links down below and get yourself entered to win. There's a whole bunch of ways to get entered, and this is a bike you're not going to want to miss. Spoiler alert, it's really fun and makes a great sound even if it's too loud. Check out yamanoob.co and get yourself signed up and get access to our Discord server, exclusive behind-the-scenes looks, and weekly Yamcast live streams a week before they go live. You'll also get entered to win the FTR and our other bikes at the same time. Anyway, back to the bike. They had a race replica version of the FTR available, but it was really just a bike with revised carbon bodywork. There wasn't an appreciable valuable difference between the S and the race replica, unless you're a true Indian simp. Note, when I'm talking about the race replica, I'm not talking about the FTR 750. That is the actual race bike. I'm talking about the FTR Carbon that's just dressed up in carbon parts. So, how does the FTR ride? Very strange. The best way I can describe it is if you put a massive modern engine into a 70s muscle car. It hauls ass in a straight line, and thanks to the long wheelbase, you can go wide open throttle without being worried about the front tire lifting on you. The weight makes the bike super stable when you're going straight, and thanks to the gas tank being moved under the seat and it's nice and low, it has a low center of gravity. The major limiting factor of the bike comes from the tires. First of all, the stock flat track rubber feels like you're rolling around on a tire from 15 years ago. It has just enough grip to get you around a corner, but if you're not careful with the throttle, it'll break loose very easily. It makes for a fun goof around bike because you can do rolling burnouts and skid the bike around, but if you're trying to ride it in a sporty way, it feels very strange. The 1918 setup doesn't really hold the bike back. Yeah, it makes it a little slower side to side, but the main problem comes back to the rubber not really meeting the road. Despite all that, the rest of the bike feels super premium. The suspension feels like a proper fully adjustable setup, the frame handles the power well, and it doesn't feel like it's going to fall apart, and the clusters are what you'd expect to be looking at when you've just spent 15 grand on the bike. So Yami, you just said the bike is great except the tires suck. If only someone had the forethought to make a flat track bike with 17s for the street. Well, wouldn't you know it, Indian has updated the FTR for 2022 with 17-inch tires that cut the wheelbase down 2.5 inches from 90 to 87.5, and they lowered the seat height from 32.1 to 30.7. Now, that might not sound like a lot to the average rider, but a change of 2.5 inches to the wheelbase will drastically improve the handling of the bike, and some proper street rubber with a more V shape will be able to effectively put down the power of the ground. We're going to be making a comparison between the 2019 FTR 1200 and a brand new FTR Carbon soon, so keep your eyes peeled for that one. But my main concern is that getting rid of the wonky tires and smaller wheels might remove some of the character that the FTR has. Yes, it's true that it's not exactly a safe and predictable ride, but that's part of the fun and in keeping with the old flat track spirit. No flat track bike is safe or predictable. That's kind of the point. Making it more normal might help them sell more bikes, but then it's just a fancy looking intermediate naked bike like all the others. But if you don't care about any of that and you just want a cool looking bike that handles well, you can get the base model FTR for $12,999 and without any of the adjustable suspension or touchscreen gauges. Then you get the S at 15 grand, those things added back in, and if you want the super fancy one, you can get the Carbon for $16,999 with everything in the S plus Carbon bodywork with the production number stamped on it. Olin suspension and a comfier seat. Oh, and before I forget, you can get the Rally, which has spoked wheels, a 1918 setup, and a Borked flat track rubber for $13,999. The thought of someone actually taking their Indian FTR Rally off-road actually makes me laugh, but is paying that much for a bike worth it when you've got hyper nakeds for not a lot more? Let's take a look. First, let's compare the FTR to a bit of an odd duck, the Honda CB1000R. A normie in a hurry might look at both of these bikes and think they're similar, so let's see if they have anything in common. Honda's packing a 998cc inline 4, putting down 143 horsepower and 77 pounds-foot of Torque-Geronimos. So similar torque figures in the Honda basically makes the same power as the Indian at 9,000 RPM when the Indian hits its red line. The Honda has a similar suspension setup with fully adjustable front forks and preload and rebound only in the rear. The Indian features Brembo brakes compared to the Tokikos on the Honda, and while they both have the same old school look, the FTR takes the cake in terms of feel. It's a completely bespoke motorcycle, and that Honda had a handful of recycled parts you'll see on other bikes in their lineup. That being said, the Honda's cheaper at $12,999 versus the FTR-S, which is the cheapest comparable model. Normally I'd have a hard time making a comparison between these two, but with the Indian on 17s it's a lot easier now. The CB is going to handle a lot better than the FTR. It's a little bit lighter too, making it more power up top as well, but if you want an actual modern classic bike and not just a neo-retro coat of paint, the FTR is for you. So how about another modern classic middleweight-ish? Well, not the best comparison in the middleweight category is probably the Z900RS. It's not as powerful as the Indian with 948cc inline 4 doing 111 horsepower and 73 pounds-foot of Torginos. Like the Honda, it's a more typical naked motorcycle. It's a smaller motorcycle. It compares more favorably with the base model FTR, and it features similar tech, so you'll have to decide whether you're looking for just a flat track style bike for a few grand more or a classic UJM bike for only $11,599. I had contemplated throwing the FTR up against the Desert Sled, but that didn't really make a lot of sense to me. The FTR is way faster, and even in rally trim, it's not really meant to be off-road. Even in the 1100cc Pro trim with Öhlins and riding modes and the $15,495 price tag, the FTRS just stomps it. I mean, the Ducati's only making 86 horsepower and 65 foot-pounds of torque. Never did I live to see the day that the American motorcycle manufacturer is making faster bikes than Ducati. The main thing to take away from in this segment here is that it's really tough to figure out what bike they compare to. The 2022 bike fit pretty confidently against the middleweight nakeds, but the 2019 bike is very much its own beast. Again, that's part of the reason why the switch to 17s in 2022 bummed me out a little bit. There's also stuff like the Triumph Scrambler XE, the kind of off-roady one, kind of similar torque figures, kind of similar situation, but again, doesn't really compare. That's more of an adventure-y off-road kind of bike with longer travel suspension and that sort of thing. Now, let's wrap this video up and talk about any technical issues you might encounter on your FTR 1200. The main complaint from riders is a crazy lean stock fuel map. When the bike is cold, it would often stumble and stall and need to be restarted a few times to get it to operating temperature. Once it reaches 160 degrees and over though, those problems start to go away. A lot of people recommended just buying a fuel tuner with this bike to make sure you have a proper tune and avoid those issues with it running kind of lean. A small issue on some of the earlier models is a bad gear position indicator, which meant that your dash might not properly display the gear. Beyond that, some people have reported weirdness with the dashboards not displaying information correctly, but that seems more like a simple software update and then it's solved. There haven't been any reports of an Aprilia-style catastrophe, engine implosion, or anything like that, so you're pretty safe in picking up an FTR and know that it'll probably run for a good amount of years. Fact, an urban legend claimed Zima was not detectable by a breathalyzer, boosting its popularity among the young and gullible. Goodbye.
Woo-wee, I tell you what, there's another Yammy New video right over here waiting for you. It's Yosemite Yam, back at it again, upgraded from Cowboy Yam by popular demand. Tell you what, click on this video right over here, gonna get you cowboying, hooting and hollering, having all kinds of fun, cutting up with your buddies out there watching another Yammy New video. Woo-wee!